I've always loved hiking. Something about the solitude, the feeling of being alone in the wild. It's a sort of peace you can't find anywhere else. The mountains and forests of the Pacific Northwest have been calling to me for years, and finally, at 24, I had the time to explore them. I'd heard the stories, locals whispering about Bigfoot sightings, things that go bump in the night, but I always shrugged them off. I wasn't someone who believed in myths. For this trip, I decided to document everything. I had a blog dedicated to hiking, sharing tips, trail guides, and personal stories from my adventures, and I wanted to make a post about the dense, misty woods of the Pacific Northwest. The forest was known for its beauty, but also its legends. Bigfoot was a favorite topic, but to me, it was just that, a legend, a way to spook tourists and add mystery to a place already filled with wonder. I had been trekking for days, the deep green canopy overhead casting long shadows as I wandered along the narrow trails. It was easy to get lost here, even with a map and compass. The wilderness had its own way of swallowing you whole. By the fourth day, I found a perfect spot to camp. There was a creek running beside me, the sound of water trickling over rocks, soothing as I set up my tent. The air was thick with the smell of pine, the forest unnervingly quiet. I didn't think much of it at the time. The absence of birdsong or animal chatter felt strange, sure, but the stillness didn't raise any immediate alarms. I pulled out my camera, eager to capture the beauty around me and share it with my followers. As I filmed, I noticed something near the creek, a set of large, unmistakable footprints. At first, I thought maybe they were from some sort of large animal, maybe a bear or elk, but the tracks were too deep, too large. The sort of footprints you'd expect from something much bigger. Probably just a prank, I muttered to myself, dismissing the thought. Maybe someone else had been here earlier. But still, a chill crawled up my spine as I set the camera down and continued filming the area. As the night settled in, the forest grew even quieter. The only sound now was the soft rustling of leaves and the gurgling of the creek. I crawled into my tent, hoping to get some rest for the long day ahead. But sleep didn't come easy. There was an unease that settled over me, something instinctual telling me that the forest wasn't as safe as it seemed. I woke up to a sound that immediately jolted me out of my half-dreaming state. Something heavy, something big, was stomping around outside my tent. My heart thudded in my chest, and my hands went clammy. Slowly, I grabbed a flashlight from my bag and unzipped the tent entrance, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I saw them. Two glowing red eyes stared back at me from the tree line. The darkness of the woods seemed to warp around them, as if whatever was out there was not quite part of this world. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hand, my mind scrambling for an explanation. My breath was ragged, the beam of light flickering, as I desperately tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I don't know what I thought at first. Maybe it was a trick of the light or some sort of animal. But that wasn't what I was looking at. It was too tall, too wide, and those eyes burned with a strange, unearthly intensity. I tried to scream, but my throat tightened, choking on the terror that flooded me. Without thinking, I scrambled out of the tent, adrenaline flooding my veins. I didn't look back. I just ran. The sound of the creature's growl echoed behind me, low and guttural, like the rumble of distant thunder. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest that I could barely hear anything else. But I could hear it. I could hear it following me. I didn't stop until I tripped, crashing into a shallow ravine. The ground beneath me was soft and wet, and I stumbled to my feet, struggling to regain my balance. The sound of the creature's heavy footsteps grew closer. Then I saw it. A towering figure loomed at the edge of the ravine, blocking my escape. It was massive, its body covered in dark, matted fur. The red eyes glowed in the moonlight, fixed on me with an almost curious intensity. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. It stood there, silent, watching me as if trying to figure me out. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind, none of them making any sense. It wasn't until the creature let out a guttural sound, a low, growling noise that vibrated the ground beneath me, that I snapped out of my trance. It wasn't a roar of aggression, though it was more like a sigh, or perhaps a warning. Slowly, I backed away, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. The creature didn't move, its gaze fixed on me as I inched backward. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it turned and disappeared into the woods, melting back into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. I stood frozen, my body trembling, unable to process what had just happened. The silence returned, but it was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to move. I was alive, but I wasn't sure if I was safe. When I finally found the courage to leave the ravine, I stumbled to the woods, every snapping twig, every rustling leaf sending me into a panic. The sun was starting to rise by the time I found the trail back to the main path. I had no idea how long I had been lost, how long I had been running from whatever that creature was. The hike out felt like a blur. My mind was racing, and every shadow in the trees made my stomach flip. I didn't know what I had seen, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. Not ever. I made it to civilization the next morning, shaken, exhausted, but alive. I went straight to a motel and collapsed onto the bed, my camera still in my pack. It took me days before I could bring myself to write about what happened. I posted the video, the footage of the glowing eyes, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. The responses were mixed. Some of my readers were intrigued, commenting that it had to have been Bigfoot. Others accused me of making all up for views. But no matter what they said, I knew what I had seen. I didn't go back to that forest. I never will. There's something in the woods, something ancient and untouchable, that doesn't take kindly to intruders. And I learned that the hard way. The wilderness has a way of protecting its secrets. And sometimes it doesn't take too kindly to those who think they can just pass through without consequence. Maybe some people will still believe it was a prank, a trick of the light, or just some animal. But I know the truth. There are things in the forest that humans don't understand, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. And no matter what anyone else thinks, I won't be the one to go looking for answers. Jesse, Rachel, Tyler, and I had been planning this trip for weeks. Our schedules were tight, and it had taken some convincing to get everyone on board, but the promise of adventure, of something eerie and unexplained, had been too much to resist. The Appalachian Mountains had always carried a certain mystique, with rumors of Bigfoot sightings in the dense, oppressive woods that covered the mountainside like a dark, pulsing secret. So when we heard about the Whispering Forest experience, an attraction that allegedly offered real-life encounters with Bigfoot, we knew we had to go. The old lodge, nestled deep in the forest, had seen better days. Paint was peeling from its wooden walls, and the roof sagged in places, but the whole place had a kind of haunted charm. It wasn't a 5-star resort by any means. Far from it. But there was something about its isolation that intrigued us. It was the perfect setting for a weekend getaway, or so we thought. The owner, a grizzled man with a thick beard and eyes that seemed to have seen far too many things, greeted us when we arrived. He didn't say much at first, just handed us our tickets and brief instructions for the night. There were a few rules, he told us in a raspy voice, but they were simple. One person at a time would venture out into forest. The others would remain behind in the lodge, waiting for the encounter to end. We weren't allowed to wander too far, and no one could go searching for the others if they were delayed. His words seemed deliberate, measured. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, like he was warning us about something more than just the usual forest dangers. When Tyler, ever the brave one, volunteered to go first, I didn't think much of it. He had always been the adventurous type, the one who dared to push boundaries, always itching to explore the unknown. Rachel followed shortly after, her eyes wide with nervous excitement. Jessie, ever the skeptic, was rolling her eyes and making sarcastic comments under her breath, but I could see the hesitation in her posture. She wasn't as sure about this whole thing as she led on, and then it was my turn. The wind had picked up, howling through the trees like a warning. The soft glow of lanterns lining the path ahead of me was the only light, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to flicker and dance in the darkness. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig underfoot. I could feel my heart pounding as I stepped forward, my every sense alert. The thrill of the unknown, of something being out there just beyond my sight, was almost intoxicating. The first howl shattered the silence, sharp and unnatural. I froze. It sounded too close, too real. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was part of the show, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a chill creeping down my spine. The howl echoed again, and I couldn't tell if it was getting closer or if my imagination was running wild. But then, something heavy brushed against my leg. A soft, almost deliberate touch that made my blood run cold. I whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing there, just the trees, their twisted branches reaching for the sky like skeletal fingers. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was part of the attraction. I had to keep going. But that's when I saw it. A massive shadow, darker than the night itself, moving between the trees. It wasn't human, I could tell that much. I only caught a glimpse before it disappeared, slipping effortlessly into the underbrush like a predator stalking its prey. I couldn't breathe for a moment, paralyzed by fear. Was it part of the show? Was it real? I didn't want to find out. I turned and began walking faster, my pulse thundering in my ears. But then, I stumbled upon something that made my stomach drop. Tyler's flashlight, lying on the ground, its lens cracked and the beam completely shattered. It was the only thing that seemed to be out of place in this otherwise pristine path. A growl sounded from behind me, deep, low, almost thoughtful. My feet froze. My heart hammered in my chest as I turned slowly, my gaze falling on the hulking figure that emerged from the trees. It wasn't a man. It wasn't any kind of animal I'd ever seen. It was massive, covered in thick, matted fur, its eyes glowing in the moonlight, its mouth parted slightly, revealing teeth that looked far too sharp for anything normal. A low growl rumbled from deep within its chest. My breath caught in my throat as it took a step forward. I bolted. My mind didn't even process what I was doing, my legs moving purely on instinct. I didn't look back, couldn't afford to look back, but I could hear it. Footsteps behind me, heavy and quick, the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. The path in front of me seemed to stretch and warp, the trees closing in, the lanterns dimming. The forest was shifting, rearranging itself, trapping me. Suddenly, I found myself in a clearing. I didn't know how I'd gotten there, but I wasn't alone. I saw Jessie, curled into a ball in a hollow tree, her eyes wide with terror, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Jessie!" I gasped, rushing to her. She clung to me as though I was her anchor to reality, her breathing erratic. She couldn't speak at first, just shaking her head, eyes wide with horror. She had seen it too. Whatever it was, it had found her. We stumbled through the woods, half running, half crawling, trying to find our way back to the lodge. The trees seemed to close in tighter, the shadows darker, as though the forest itself didn't want us to leave. Finally, after what felt like hours, we stumbled upon Rachel and Tyler, standing by the lodge. They were unharmed but confused, as if they hadn't seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. "Where were you guys?" Tyler asked, looking us over as if we were the ones who had gone missing. We tried to explain, but the words didn't come out right. The fear, the shock, it all jumbled together. The owner of the attraction, who had been waiting in the lodge, claimed it was all part of the experience, a scripted scare designed to make us feel like we were being hunted by Bigfoot. He seemed oddly calm about it, as if he'd seen it all before. His eyes didn't reflect the same fear we had. It wasn't until weeks later that we learned the truth. A park ranger had gone missing from a nearby station. Searchers found nothing but a series of deep, bloody claw marks on trees near the lodge, marks that didn't belong to any known creature. Bigfoot was real, and whatever we had encountered that night was not a part of some stage show. It was something much darker, something that watched the forest, waiting for the next curious soul to step too far off the path. I haven't been back to the Appalachian Mountains since, and I don't think I ever will. Some things are better left unexplored.